The leopard cub was barely breathing when Elder Kofi found her collapsed beneath the ancient baobab tree. She couldn't have been more than 4 months old, her golden coat with distinctive rosette spots matted with mud and blood. Her amber eyes, glazed and unfocused, stared up at nothing. Her tiny ribcage rose and fell in shallow, desperate gasps that came too far apart. Kofi knelt slowly, his weathered hands hovering over the cub's body. He could see the swelling on her left hind leg, the skin stretched tight and discolored, gray-purple, like a bruise that had spread beneath the surface. Infection. Defies. The kind that killed within days if left untreated. The sacred forest of the Congo basin had been Kofi's home for 73 years. He knew every tree, every stream, every animal that walked these paths. And he knew, with the certainty of a lifetime spent reading nature's signs, that this cub should already be dead. Modern veterinarians would say she needed antibiotics, surgery, sterile equipment. They would say a man with no medical degree, no laboratory, no technology had no business trying to save her. But Kofi's people, the Baka tribe, had healed animals in these forests for over 1,000 years, using methods passed down through generations, methods that modern science had long dismissed as primitive superstition. As the cub's breathing grew fainter, Kofi made a choice that would soon divide an entire community and challenge everything wildlife experts thought they knew about survival. He pressed his palm gently against the cub's chest and whispered words in a language older than the forest itself. The Congo Basin, the world's second-largest rainforest, stretches across 6 African nations. It's a place where ancient traditions and modern conservation efforts exist in uneasy tension, where tribal communities who have lived alongside leopards, gorillas, and forest elephants for centuries now find themselves caught between protecting their heritage and following government wildlife regulations. Elder Kofi was the oldest member of the Baka tribe still living deep within the forest. At 73, his face was a map of wrinkles, his hands gnarled like the roots of the trees he revered. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing, and his knowledge of medicinal plants was legendary even among his own people. The Baka had always believed the forest was sacred, that every creature within it had a spirit that deserved respect. They had learned over countless generations which plants could stop bleeding, which could draw out infection, which could calm pain. They learned by watching animals, how gorillas ate certain leaves when wounded, how chimpanzees chewed specific bark when sick. That morning, Kofi had been gathering herbs near the old baobab tree, a massive tree that his grandfather claimed was over 300 years old. The tree's thick trunk was so wide that 10 men holding hands couldn't encircle it, and its branches spread like giant arms reaching toward the sky. The Congo Basin was alive with its usual sounds, the distant calls of colobus monkeys, the harsh cries of African gray parrots, the rustle of forest floor animals moving through the undergrowth. But as Kofi bent to dig up a root, the forest suddenly went silent. Complete, absolute silence. Kofi froze. In 73 years he had learned that when the forest goes quiet, it means one of 2 things. A predator is hunting, or something is dying. He moved carefully through the massive roots of the baobab tree, and that's when he saw her. The leopard cub lay in a small hollow between 2 massive roots, so still she almost looked like a pile of leaves. But then Kofi saw the shallow rise and fall of her ribs, heard the faint wheeze of her breathing. He approached slowly, speaking softly in the Baka language. The cub didn't react. Her eyes were open but unseeing, her small pink tongue lolling slightly from her mouth. Kofi circled carefully, examining her from every angle without touching. The infected leg was obvious, swollen to nearly twice its normal size, hot to the touch even from inches away. He could see the puncture wounds, probably from a porcupine quill or a sharp thorn that had broken off deep in the muscle. He looked around for the mother. Leopard mothers never left cubs this young unless something was terribly wrong. After 20 minutes of waiting and watching, Kofi realized the truth. The cub had been abandoned. The mother had either died or, sensing the cub's infection, had left her behind, a brutal but common survival choice in the wild. The cub was alone. And without intervention, she would be dead by nightfall. Kofi pulled out his small wooden pipe and sat down heavily on a root. He knew the law. Touching a leopard, even a cub, was illegal without authorization. The wildlife department had strict protocols. If he reported this, they would send a team, veterinarians with tranquilizers and equipment. But the nearest ranger station was 20 kilometers away through dense jungle. By the time they arrived, prepared the capture team, and transported the cub to a facility, it would be too late. Kofi looked at the cub's face, at the way her whiskers trembled with each labored breath. He put away his pipe, rolled up his sleeves, and got to work. Kofi worked quickly, his movements practiced and sure despite his age. First, he needed to reduce the infection before it spread to the cub's bloodstream. From his woven basket, he pulled out several items he'd gathered that morning: leaves from the Prunus africana tree, roots of the African ginger plant, bark from the croton tree, and a small gourd of honey collected from wild forest bees. Modern veterinarians would later call what he did next medically reckless. But to Kofi, it was simply knowledge, the same knowledge that had saved countless animals over the centuries. He crushed the Prunus africana leaves between two stones, creating a thick paste. This tree, known to the Baka as the healing tree, was one of nature's most powerful antibacterials. His grandmother had used it to treat infected wounds on animals and people alike. Next, he grated the African ginger root against a rough stone, mixing the pale yellow pulp with the leaf paste. This ginger reduced swelling and fought infection. His people had known this for over 1,000 years. Western medicine was only recently beginning to understand why. But the most crucial ingredient was the croton tree bark. This bark could strengthen the heart and improve circulation, essential for an animal whose body was shutting down from septic shock. Kofi boiled water in a small clay pot over a fire he built carefully between the baobab roots. He added the bark and let it steep, creating a dark, bitter tea. While it cooled, he turned his attention back to the cub. The infected leg needed to be drained, or the poison would continue spreading. Kofi had no scalpel, no sterilized blade. What he had was a sharp piece of volcanic rock, obsidian-like stone, that his grandfather had given him 60 years ago. It was still sharper than any metal knife, and when heated in fire and cleaned with medicinal plant water, it was as sterile as anything in a hospital. He heated the stone until it glowed red, then plunged it into a mixture of boiled plant water and salt. Steam hissed from the water. The cub was too weak to even flinch as Kofi made a small, precise incision at the center of the swelling. Thick, yellow-gray pus oozed from the wound, releasing pressure immediately. The cub made a soft mewling sound, the first sound she'd made since he found her. Kofi worked the wound gently, encouraging the infection to drain. The smell was overwhelming, putrid, but he'd smelled worse. When the drainage turned from pus to clear fluid tinged with blood, he knew he'd gotten most of it. He packed the wound with the leaf and ginger paste, then wrapped it carefully with strips of clean cloth soaked in honey. Honey, he knew, would keep the wound from becoming infected again while it healed. Scientists called it antimicrobial properties. Kofi called it the gift of the forest bees. Finally, he lifted the cub's head gently. She weighed almost nothing, far too light for her age, and poured small amounts of the croton bark tea into her mouth. Most of it dribbled out, but some went down her throat. He saw her swallow reflexively. For the next 6 hours, Kofi stayed with the cub. Every 20 minutes, he gave her more tea. Every hour he checked the wound, changing the bandage when it became soaked with drainage. He sang to her old Baka songs about the forest, about leopards who walked between worlds, about the bond between all living things. As the sun began to set, painting the forest in shades of orange and gold, the cub's breathing changed. It became deeper, more regular. Her eyes, which had been cloudy and unfocused all day, suddenly sharpened. She looked directly at Kofi. And then she made a sound, a tiny, pitiful meow that was more kitten than leopard. Kofi smiled, tears tracking through the dirt on his weathered face. "Yes, little one," he whispered in Baka. "You're still here." Word spread through the forest faster than Kofi expected. By the next morning, two things happened simultaneously. The cub showed dramatic improvement, and the Wildlife Conservation Department showed up. Dr. Amélie Dubois, a wildlife veterinarian from France who had been working in the Congo for 15 years, arrived at the baobab tree with 3 rangers and a portable medical kit. She was in her early 40s, educated in Paris and trained in modern wildlife medicine. She had seen Kofi's type before, well-meaning tribal elders who thought ancient remedies could substitute for real medical care. When she saw the leopard cub lying on a bed of soft moss, awake and alert, with Kofi sitting beside her, she stopped dead in her tracks. "Est-ce que vous avez fait?" she demanded, then switched to accented English. "What have you done?" Kofi stood slowly, his joints creaking. "I saved her life." "You had no right. This is an African leopard, a protected species. Touching her without authorization is a criminal offense. You could go to prison." "She would have been dead before your authorization arrived," Kofi replied calmly in his carefully learned English. Dr. Dubois knelt beside the cub, her professional training taking over her anger. She checked the cub's vitals, pulse, breathing, temperature. She carefully unwrapped Kofi's honey-soaked bandage and examined the wound. Her frown deepened. The wound was clean, already beginning to close at the edges. The surrounding tissue, which should have been gray and necrotic, looked pink and healthy. The cub's eyes were clear, her breathing normal, her temperature slightly elevated but nothing like the raging fever she should have had with an infection this advanced. "This doesn't make sense," Dr. Dubois muttered. She looked at the bandage in her hand, sniffed it. "What is this?" "Honey. And this paste, what plants did you use?" "Prunus africana leaves," Kofi said. "African ginger root. For the infection." "Prunus africana and ginger root," Dr. Dubois repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. "You treated a life-threatening infection with forest plants and honey." "With medicine," Kofi corrected gently. "The same medicine my people have used for 1,000 years." Dr. Dubois stood abruptly. "We're taking her to the rehabilitation center in Brazzaville. She needs real antibiotics, intravenous fluids, proper veterinary care." "She needs to heal," Kofi said. "And she's healing here." "That's not your decision to make." "It was my decision yesterday when you weren't here." The tension between them was thick enough to cut. The rangers shifted uncomfortably, unsure whose authority to follow, the European veterinarian or the tribal elder who had clearly saved the cub's life. Finally, Dr. Dubois made her decision. "Fine. We'll transport her immediately. If we wait any longer, she could relapse, and then whatever you did won't matter." Two rangers moved forward with a transport cage. The cub, sensing the change in energy, tried to stand for the first time. She wobbled on 3 legs, keeping her injured leg tucked up, and made a sound between a hiss and a meow. Kofi stepped between the rangers and the cub. "If you take her now, you'll undo everything. She needs 3 more days of treatment to ensure the infection is completely gone. If you move her, the stress alone could kill her. I'm a trained veterinarian, old man. I know what I'm doing. And I am a trained healer, young woman. And I know this forest and I know this cub." They stared at each other, neither backing down. Finally, Dr. Dubois pulled out her satellite phone. "I'm calling my supervisor. This decision is above my authority." The compromise came from an unexpected source. Dr. Dubois's supervisor, Dr. Jean-Baptiste Camara, was a Congolese wildlife biologist in his 60s who had worked in the Congo basin for over 30 years. He had witnessed the clash between traditional knowledge and modern science before, and he had learned that sometimes the old ways held wisdom that textbooks missed. "Let the cub stay under Kofi's care," Dr. Camara said over the satellite phone, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But Dr. Dubois will visit twice daily to monitor her condition. If the cub shows any signs of decline, she'll be immediately transported to the facility." Agreed. Neither Kofi nor Dr. Dubois was happy, but both nodded. For the next 3 days, Dr. Dubois arrived at dawn and dusk. Each time, she brought her medical kit, ready to intervene. And each time, she found the cub stronger than before. On the second day, the cub was sitting up, grooming herself, attempting to bite at the bandage on her leg. On the third day, she was standing, putting weight on the injured leg, and eating small pieces of meat that Kofi had brought from a recent hunt. Dr. Dubois documented everything meticulously: the wound healing rate, the cub's weight gain, her activity levels. She took samples of Kofi's paste and the bark tea to send to a laboratory in Kinshasa for analysis. On the evening of the third day, as the sun set once again over the sacred forest, Dr. Dubois sat on a root across from Kofi, watching the cub stumble around playfully, pouncing on leaves. "I don't understand," she admitted quietly. "By every medical standard I know, she should be dead or permanently disabled. That infection was advanced enough to require amputation of the leg, followed by weeks of intensive antibiotic treatment. But she's thriving." Kofi smiled gently. "Your medicine treats the disease. My medicine treats the animal. There's a difference." "What do you mean?" "Your antibiotics kill bacteria. Very effective. But they also stress the body, upset the stomach, weaken the animal while it's already fighting. My medicine, Prunus africana, African ginger, honey, croton bark, these don't just kill infection. They strengthen the body, reduce inflammation, improve circulation, calm the spirit. They work with the animal's own healing, not against it." Dr. Dubois was quiet for a long moment. "The lab results came back this afternoon," she finally said. "The Prunus africana extract showed antibacterial properties equivalent to moderate-spectrum antibiotics. The African ginger's compounds had anti-inflammatory markers that were remarkably potent. And the croton bark?" She shook her head in disbelief. "It contains alkaloids that improve cardiac output and vascular health. Everything you did had a scientific basis. We just use different words for it." "Science and tradition aren't enemies," Kofi said. "They're looking at the same truth from different directions." That night, Dr. Dubois asked Kofi something she'd been wondering since she first arrived. "Why did you risk prison to save her? She's just one cub. Leopards are endangered, yes, but one cub, statistically, doesn't change their survival odds that much." Kofi looked at the cub, who had curled up against his leg and fallen asleep, her tiny body rising and falling with deep, healthy breaths. "My grandfather told me a story when I was a boy. He said that every animal we save twice, once in body and once in spirit. When we save an animal's body, we keep it alive. But when we save its spirit, when we show it that humans can be healers and not just destroyers, we save something in ourselves, too. We remember what we're supposed to be." He ran his weathered hand gently over the cub's head. "This cub will grow up knowing that a human healed her, protected her, treated her with respect. Maybe one day she'll remember that. Maybe she won't. But I'll remember. And perhaps that's what matters most." On the seventh day, Dr. Dubois and her team returned to assess the cub for release. The wound had healed completely, leaving only a thin pink scar. The cub was active, playful, and at a healthy weight. Blood tests showed no signs of infection or systemic illness. "She's ready," Dr. Dubois announced. "We need to release her back into the forest before she becomes too habituated to human presence." Kofi nodded. He had known this moment was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. They decided to release her near a known leopard territory, an area where an adult female had been spotted with older cubs who might still tolerate a juvenile. It was the cub's best chance of survival. The morning of the release was cool and misty. The forest was waking up slowly, birds beginning their dawn chorus. Dr. Dubois, 3 rangers, Dr. Kamara who had traveled from Brazzaville, and Kofi all stood in a small clearing about 2 kilometers from the baobab tree. The transport cage sat in the center of the clearing. Inside, the cub paced nervously, no longer comfortable in confinement. Dr. Kamara addressed the small group. "This is an unusual situation. Normally, we would handle the release ourselves. But Elder Kofi saved this cub's life using knowledge that conservation science has long dismissed as superstition. I think it's appropriate that he be the one to return her to the forest." He handed Kofi the key to the cage. Kofi approached slowly. The cub recognized him immediately, pressing her face against the cage bars and making a soft chirping sound, the sound leopard cubs use to communicate with their mothers. Kofi knelt down and spoke to her in the Baka language, his voice gentle. "You're going home now, little one. Back to where you belong. Walk carefully. Well, remember that not all humans are enemies." He unlocked the cage and swung the door open wide. For a moment, the cub didn't move. She looked at Kofi, then at the open forest beyond, then back at Kofi. Dr. Dubois held her breath, suddenly worried the cub had bonded too strongly that she wouldn't leave. But then the cub took one step forward, then another. She paused at the cage door, turned back one last time to look at Kofi. And Kofi did something that made everyone present fall silent. He pressed both palms over his heart and bowed his head deeply, a gesture of profound respect in Baka culture, normally reserved for elders and sacred spirits. The cub tilted her head, as if understanding the gesture's significance. Then she turned and bounded into the forest, her golden coat with black rosettes blending quickly into the dappled shadows. Within seconds, she had disappeared completely, as if she'd never been there at all. The group stood in silence, watching the space where she'd vanished. Finally, Dr. Kamara spoke, his voice thick with emotion. In 40 years of wildlife work, I've never seen anything quite like that. Dr. Dubois wiped her eyes, not bothering to hide her tears. Neither have I. Kofi remained kneeling, his hands still over his heart, his weathered face peaceful. She'll be fine, he said quietly. The forest will take care of her now. 3 months later, Dr. Dubois returned to the sacred forest, not on official business, but to visit Kofi. She found him at the same baobab tree, gathering herbs just as he had been the day he found the cub. I have something to show you, she said, pulling out her tablet. On the screen was a photo taken by a camera trap, a motion-activated wildlife camera used to study leopard populations. The image showed a young leopardess, perhaps 7 months old, healthy and strong, with a distinctive thin scar on her left hind leg. That's her, Dr. Dubois said, smiling. The camera trap is in the territory of an adult female. Our girl has been accepted into a family group. She's hunting, she's healthy, she's thriving. Kofi studied the photo for a long moment, then looked up at the forest canopy. Thank you for showing me. There's more, Dr. Dubois continued. Dr. Kamara has approved a new initiative. We're documenting traditional healing methods used by forest tribes, particularly for wildlife. We're creating a database that combines traditional knowledge with modern veterinary medicine. We want you to be part of it. We want to learn from you. Kofi looked surprised. You want to learn from an old man with no degree? I want to learn from a healer with 73 years of experience and 1,000 years of knowledge behind him. There's a difference. She paused. I was wrong to dismiss you. I let my education make me arrogant. But you taught me something important, that science isn't about rejecting old knowledge. It's about understanding why old knowledge works. Kofi smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. And you taught me something too. That documenting this knowledge, writing it down, sharing it with the world, that's not betraying tradition. It's honoring it. It's making sure it doesn't die with me. Over the next year, Dr. Dubois visited Kofi regularly. They documented dozens of plants, preparation methods, treatment protocols. Other Baka elders, seeing the respect Dr. Dubois showed Kofi, came forward with their own knowledge. The resulting database became a resource used by wildlife veterinarians across Central Africa, combining traditional healing wisdom with modern medical techniques. Countless animals, not just leopards, but gorillas, forest elephants, chimpanzees, even birds, were treated using methods that might otherwise have been lost. And every time Dr. Dubois treated an animal using the knowledge Kofi had shared, she thought of the leopard cub who should have died but didn't, who became the bridge between two worlds, the ancient and the modern, the traditional and the scientific. One evening, 2 years after the rescue, Kofi and Dr. Dubois sat together beneath the baobab tree, watching the sun set through the dense forest canopy. Do you think she remembers? Dr. Dubois asked. Do you think she remembers you? Kofi was quiet for a moment. The forest remembers, he finally said. Whether she does or not, the forest remembers every act of healing, every moment of compassion. And that memory becomes part of the forest spirit, passed down through generations. My grandfather healed a leopard once, when he was young. My father healed a young gorilla. I healed this cub. Perhaps someday, a young person from my tribe will heal another animal, carrying forward this chain of compassion. That's beautiful, Dr. Dubois said softly. That's tradition, Kofi replied. Not superstition. Not primitive. Just knowledge, love, and respect passed from hand to hand across time. In the distance, a leopard called, the distinctive sawing sound that marked territory and announced presence. Kofi and Dr. Dubois both turned their heads toward the sound. Could that be her? Dr. Dubois wondered. Kofi smiled. Maybe. Or maybe it's her mother. Or her sister. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the call continues. That leopards still walk these forests. That the ancient and the modern can walk together, healing together. The call echoed through the trees once more, powerful and alive, a sound that had filled these forests for thousands of years and, with care and wisdom, would continue for thousands more. This story isn't just about a leopard cub or a tribal elder. It's about the dangerous divide we've created between ancient wisdom and modern science, a divide that doesn't need to exist. For too long, we've dismissed traditional African knowledge as primitive, as superstition, as something to be replaced by real medicine. But what if we've been wrong? What if the knowledge accumulated over thousands of years of living alongside nature holds truths that our laboratories are only now beginning to understand? Kofi didn't reject science. He simply knew something science had forgotten, that healing isn't just about killing disease, it's about strengthening life. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Leave a comment telling us about traditional knowledge from your own culture that deserves respect and recognition. Hit like and subscribe for more stories that bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. Because the future of conservation doesn't belong to science alone, or to tradition alone. It belongs to both, walking together, healing together. Sometimes the oldest medicine is the best medicine. We just have to be humble enough to listen.